Let us practice drawing an eye. First of all, think about a sphere. We're going to practice drawing a sphere and review this. We've done this in class. First of all, draw a circle. And then we have to define the light source. Depending on the light source, you can add the shadow to make it more 3D. When you're shading, put your pencil in angle for the larger area, and then as you get more detail with the sharp things, you want to get the angle a little bit more upright. For this larger surface, you want to put the pencil on an angle so you can cover up more surface more evenly and lightly. And then we're going to develop the core shadow by layering more and more. When you're layering more pencils, please make sure that you change the angle of the lines too. Don't just stay in one direction of a stroke. You want to change the angle here and there to really make it more smoother transition. And then cast shadow. Cast shadow is a shadow that casting over another surface. So where the object touches the surface is the darkest, and then it gets lighter as it gets further from the object. So this is if that's the light source, we have a highlight, which is the lightest of all, and then midtone, which is transitional, and then core shadow, which is the darkest, and then we have reflected light. And then we have cast shadow. And let's apply this to an eyeball. So let's say this is an eyeball. Draw lightly because we're going to erase it later. I'm just drawing this so you understand how the light, the eyeball is covered by the skin. And so this is an opening of the skin that covers up almost 1/3 of the eyeball. And so the eyeball is underneath our skin. You can see that skin opening doesn't go over the size of the eyeball. Think about the size of the opening of your skin that covers up the eyeball. And then we have another line on top and then underneath too. Underneath one is not really a folded line, whereas the upper line is actually a folded line, the eyelid. And then center another circle inside the circle for the iris. Yep, that would be the pupil, the darkest part of all. And then darken the iris and the pupil. And then think about it. This is like the leather covering over a sphere, which is the eyeball. So you have to shade in that roundness on the left side because we're just pretending that light is coming from the right side. So underneath, again, this is an eyeball. It's round. It's sphere. So we have to kind of get into a shading mode. Sphere is white, but still where the light doesn't touch is not completely white. It's shaded in. Same thing applies to the eyeball. So even though the eyeball is white, we don't want to leave it completely white. We want to define the cast shadow that's been created by the leather, the skin. The skin is covering the eyeball, and then the thickness of the skin is actually casting, the shadow is casting over the white part and the whole eyeball area. And so I'm going to define the underneath, see the thickness of the skin, so I'm going to draw another line. The top one, you can't really see it because of the angle that we are looking at. And so underneath, I can see the skin, the thickness of the skin, so I draw another line. And then also, this is still round. It's covering up the sphere. So I'm going to shade it on the left side of the skin. Take your time. Layer a lot. Do not just press down your pencil so hard. It's rather you just want to put layers after layers in different angles of strokes. And then inside the iris, divide them into like, you know, pizza slices? You're slicing thousands of pizzas. Think about that. It's a radial balance, meaning the lines are going towards the center of the eyeball. And then you're darkening the top part with the pupil. And then you can go a little bit more layers around the entire iris area. You see how many times I layer over? Layering is very important technique of drawing. The more layers you get, the more developed the drawings are gonna be. So just keep on layering over and over, refine and define, render more, layer more. That's the key to success in this type of drawing. So I'm going to layer again on the iris. Some lines are lighter, some lines are darker, some lines are longer, some lines are shorter. So you want the variety of lines in shading and layering more when you develop the form. And then bring out the highlight with an eraser. I really like the eraser on the end of, like on the top of the mechanical pencils. They work just fine. So bring out some highlight with those erasers if you have one. If you don't have one, you can just use regular eraser. Just cut a little bit to make it a little bit sharp and small. And then bring out some highlight. Highlight makes everything look so much more developed and finished. Again, how many times did I layer over the eyeball? I don't know. A lot. And now I'm going to go on to eyelashes. First of all, let's see. This is again radial balance. Radial movement. Because we're drawing something that goes over a sphere form. So then I'm going to make the center line. And then the eyelash onto the right side goes towards the right a lot in angle, radial movement. And then the left side is actually shorter because you can see that that's kind of like a caruncle on the left side. So it's kind of shorter and it gets bigger and longer towards the right side. And I'm going to go in betweens, kind of like longer lines and smaller lines. Eyelashes are very irregular in length and angle. So largely saying it's kind of going towards the right side longer, but in between ones can be shorter and can be a little bit different angles too. If you make it super regular, it kind of looks like a fake eyelash, which is fine too. But I'm just going to make it a little bit more in variety in sizes and the angle. And then again, this part of the eyelid is actually folded skin if you think about it. So I'm going to make into a little bit darker line onto the left side. I'm going to make that line variation. So a bit darker on the left side, and then it gets a little bit lighter to the right side. Again, our light source is coming from the right side. That's why. And so this is not completely a line. So I'm going to make it into a, generally speaking, like pretty smooth form and folded leather. Think about it. Our skin is kind of like leather. It's pretty thick. Not literally leather, but like pretty thick. And it has that fold. The thickness of the fold is not paper thin. And that's the nose. And then now I'm going to go into the eyebrow. First of all, I'm just going to briefly just measure up the size of the eyebrow. And then if you think about it, if you really observe, everybody's eyebrow looks different in sizes and shape. But the way their hair kind of makes that movement is very similar. So first of all, towards the nose is kind of straight up, and it makes the wide angle towards the right side. And then there's another layer of top that goes downward. So your hair, how the hair actually makes that movement, visual movement, is very important to notice. And this is very, very similar to everybody. Like everybody has a very similar hair movement. Not literally moving, you know what I mean. That angle that hair makes, how that grow, is very similar in that movement. Although the shapes could be different. And the length and the, amount of the hair could be different. But normally speaking, that's how our eyebrow grows. So it kind of goes straight up, and then as it gets towards the right side, it makes that wide angle. And then on top of the eyebrow, we have another layer that kind of comes downwards. Yep. Right there, downwards. And then combined together, where they meet is the darkest of our eyebrows. And then we're going to shade it in to make more round form of our face. So we're trying to make it more 3D, even for the skin part. So you can tell where the dark area is, where the light area is, depending on the form of your face. But I'm just being pretty much general. I'm not looking at anything. It's just more like a genetic proportion of an eyeball. It may look different person to person, but generally speaking, if the light source is coming from the right side, the left side of your eyeball is going to be darker. And then it gets a little bit lighter because your nose is forming upward. Again, I layer another pencil layer to make it more developed. So you can see the line variation. If you're drawing something more realistic and 3D, you do not want to make all lines the same. You want to think about the line quality. Some lines are going to have, even though it's a one line, it's going to have a dark area versus the lighter area. I didn't like the highlight, so I just fixed it smaller. I thought it was a little too big.